taken hostage as a prisoner of war. He would spend, John McCain, the next 5.5 years, 1,966 days in prison. After his release with 107 others, he never stopped advocating for the freedom of all those who are tortured, held hostage, and wrongfully held. My name is Pedro, and as someone born in Colombia, the scourge of hostage-taking and wrongfully detaining people is personal. There was a time when the ever-present fear of being taken hostage never left our bones. But as McCain used to say, mentioning he was quoting Chairman Mao, the night is always darkest before it turns pitch black. A bit of the light of the dawn has arrived in Colombia, at least as to hostages. And we hope, so help us God, that it slowly and surely arrives for all those held hostage around the world. We've launched the John McCain Freedom for Political Prisoners Committee, chaired by none other than Vladimir Karamurza, to support all these efforts. Today, we're joined by a former hostage and the person and the office who got him home. Please join me in welcoming the United States Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, the SPIHA, Ambassador Roger Carstens, and former hostage Siamek Namazi. Now, some quick intros, if I may, and we'll launch into it right away. Ambassador Carstens served in both Trump and the Biden administration. Under his leadership, the American government has released close to 85 or more Americans and green card holders, 70 in this administration or more, 56 in the last one, 140 people since PPD 30. And he has brought them home. This means that 85 Americans and their families have been reunited, and it reminds us of what it means to be a citizen and what America stands for. No words, Ambassador, can really express how much we admire what you and your team do and the way in which you do it. What you have accomplished in the last 4.5 years, including bringing our friend and one of Senator McCain's pallbearers, Vladimir Karamurza, home, is nothing short of miraculous, and it's an incredible amount of work, perseverance, and optimism. Thank you so much. Joining us is none other than Siamek Namazi, who was released on September 18th, 2023, after being held hostage in Iran's Evin prison for 2,898 days, 8 years. After Robert Levinson, he's the longest held American hostage in Iran. Today, Siamek is dedicated to advocating for the release of hostages and for the need to put in place policies that deter the taking of hostages. Siamek is one of the most profound thinkers on this issue. His vivid metaphors and sense of humor is so refreshing and enlightening, but no pressure though, Siamek. We can't thank you enough for all you do for current and future hostages, and for being willing to sit down with us today. It speaks to your character and your fortitude. With both your help and everyone here watching online and in the wider community, we'll both get more people home and prevent, deter, and stop nations and non-state actors from taking hostages in the first place. Okay, so let's dive right in. Sorry, that was long. Now that we have a captive audience, let's talk about American captives. We're going to focus on deterrence and support. So some scene setting, Ambassador. Last Wednesday, your office accomplished what few thought possible. You got the last Americans officially designated as wrongfully detained from that small and very non-influential country of China. Jason, Kai, and Mark are back home, and right before Thanksgiving. You've talked about how Secretary Blinken carries a card with him at all times. And he has said that there's nothing more meaningful about his job than getting an American home. So tell us how that feels, what it meant, and let us dive into what that meant for those few Americans.
Now, I hope this works. It does. Fantastic. So first off, thank you, Pedro, for hosting this and moderating this and for inviting us to participate in this panel. Thanks to the McCain Institute for bringing us all together, and thank you for participating and joining this. Obviously, I think it's an important topic, and I'm glad you do too. So to answer, by the way, I have a cup of coffee up here because I always feel nervous in front of a public audience, and coffee somehow calms me down. So forgive me for my jitters. But to jump right into it, to watch an American walk up a gangway to a plane door and walk in, someone who only maybe 8 hours prior was in a jail that person had been in for 12 years, 4 years, or 8 years, And to watch them walk in and see an American flag that's draped over the bulkhead of that plane, to be warmly greeted by their countrymen and know that they're finally going home, to have the honor to witness that is life-changing. It's amazing, and I've had the pleasure of seeing it more than a few times, to include when this fine gentleman walked on a plane. But the thing that always breaks my heart and makes me just really appreciate the opportunity to serve in this manner is when I get to see them crash into their loved ones when we land in San Antonio. And in Siamek's case, out in Fort Belvoir, when someone steps off a plane who's not seen his or her loved one in like 5, 6, 7 years, and they run to get that first hug. I think you've heard this before, forgive me, but it's so intimate and emotional and powerful that I often think like I have to look away, and yet you can't. You're just transfixed. You have to watch these two human beings connect, and suddenly it makes all the hours, all the time you've spent in the air, all the time that you've missed with your family worth it, because you're watching these Americans come together. And I think that very feeling is something that my team tries to use as a driving engine to get work done. And it's something that we try to share with people so you get a sense of what it is that we're trying to achieve. Because at the end of the day, especially with the crowd here, it could happen to any of us. You know, you take the wrong medication to a certain country because you're trying to get over cancer. You tweeted something in Florida, and then you travel to a country that's going to get your cell phone and arrest you for having made that tweet under your First Amendment rights in the United States of America. So we're all at risk of being pulled in by some of these countries. And it's important to have discussions like this, and it's important to answer questions like that to kind of convey what it is we're trying to do and what it is that we've actually done.
Thank you. It is life-changing. And Siamek, as Kylie, who just came back, you also spent 8 years held hostage. Tell us what the U.S. government did well and what it can do better to support hostage families and hostages when they're held there.
Thank you very much, Pedro. I apologize, I've lost a bit of my voice. Let me tell you, when I immigrated to this country in 1983 as a child of 12, I was trying to catch up, with my English not being perfect. I worked really hard to catch up with the rest of the students. And I remember praying to God that someday I could do something worthy of history books. Well, I think that happened 40 years later in September 2023, just not quite the way I imagined it. Unfortunately, I carry the highly uncoveted title of the longest held American hostage in Iran. Not exactly the record that I imagined. So if you're going to have one takeaway from this talk today, let it be this. God has a sense of humor. Be very specific what you wish for as a child. Jokes aside, it's really an honor to be here, especially at this inaugural event of the McCain Institute. In the darkest of the 2,898 days, 8 years, that I spent in Evin prison, I do recall sometimes thinking about the example of Senator McCain and being inspired, because I knew that I'm just experiencing a drop in the bucket of what that man endured. And his resilience really, really, really inspired me. So it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be sitting next to Roger and playing second fiddle, a distant second fiddle in the background to him. This is literally the man who met me on the tarmac in Doha and brought me on a private jet here. And since then, I think it's a breach of my human rights that I have to fly economy commercial. So there are some side effects to that. But seriously, I heard about Roger a lot when I was in prison throughout the time. My brother talked a lot about this is a man who's truly dedicated, truly dedicated to bringing Americans home. And so in this event, in front of this distinguished audience, I want to say once again, thank you, Roger, for not just for what you've done for me and my family, but for what you've done for everyone else. I'm deeply saddened to hear that you won't continue this role. I'm a little encouraged by the fact that President Trump, in his final days, had a very good pick. So I trust in his next pick. I've heard good things already, but I don't envy your successor's position. Those are some pretty big combat boots he has to fill. Truly. And to your question about what we've done right, what the US government gets right, it's precisely bringing people like Roger in. There are so many people across 3 administrations. I was there from Obama's time through Trump and President Biden. There are so many people that a year out, and I haven't even begun to get through my list of people I need to meet, try to meet, and thank, and shake their hands. We have fantastic people who are extremely caring, who really go out of their way. And I can't be grateful enough. Having said that, it would be remiss of me to say that we've got it right, that that a hostage can just sit back and know that the government has their back. That is far from the truth. But let me pause here and read you something from the personal diaries of prisoner 94-146 to explain what I mean by that. These are unpublished. Let me tell you the perspective from my cage. Imagine Iran decides to keep its US hostages indefinitely, just so that it can go on reveling in the kind of triumphalism one can only experience by making innocent American citizens languish behind bars. What discomfort would it face for doing so? Absolutely nothing. That's why Tehran's strategy is as unsurprising as it is wrong. It plans to hold on to us until it can parlay our misery into what it considers a suitable win. Now envisage DC's dilemma, applying America's unmatched leverage in a manner that's persuasive enough for Iran to put us on a plane home is messy. It involves paying political costs or dealing with undesirable externalities. But we're just ordinary citizens who don't have a powerful lobby pressing the White House to rescue us. What price would a president pay for ignoring our plight and letting Iran keep us captive endlessly, or at least until the potential blowback of dealing with this problem diminishes? Absolutely nothing. All said, perhaps both our captors and rescuers want us to sit tight for as long as it takes for them to feel good and ready to play the hostage pieces. Yet the thing is, I have a terrible time forgetting I'm a human being whose life is being destroyed by this sick game. I've also learned a thing or two during these long years that I've been Iran's hostage. Already 2 presidents chose to rescue others but leave me behind. And God only knows how many other times I was almost freed. So do you know what I'm afraid will happen if I sit noiselessly in my cell and wait for salvation? Absolutely nothing. So that's how I felt. And I still will stand by the version of prisoner 94-146. But I would add that bringing Americans home, Americans whose only crime was carrying a blue passport, bringing them back is not the only mission. That once we are back, we need more help integrating and reintegrating into society. Thank you.
Thank you, Siamek. Yeah. I want to talk more about support and all the things that we've gotten a little bit better about support. But before we go into it, Ambassador, I wanted to ask you about, I think it was Adam Serlasky who wrote that great Vanity Fair piece about you, if you haven't read it, that he quipped that this issue is probably only bipartisan issue that remains. Can you tell us, having served in both the Trump administration and the Biden administration, why that is and how to move it forward as we go through administrations?
I think part of the reason is because of everyone in this audience. I think there was a time before President Obama led the hostage policy review where people didn't quite understand what this issue was about, how to solve the problem. And I think people in the audience, senators, congressmen, NGOs like Hostage US and the Foley Foundation and others, and the McCain Institute. Evelyn, I see you over there. You were hiding in the darkness. Hello, good to see you there. Stacia right behind it, salute. But I think people now know that this is an issue, and when they know it, and when a family goes to visit a Republican congressman, a Democratic senator, they watch Bring Our Families Home, conduct a protest outside the White House, everyone kind of gets what's at stake and what the problem is. And kind of like I said a few minutes ago, this could happen to anyone. Americans love to travel. We also like to go to NGOs and solve problems overseas. We like to be medical doctors in places like Syria. We like to conduct journalism in pretty much every country on the world. We have this adventurous spirit where we also want to help people and focus on the truth. And so this could happen to anyone. And I think anyone, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you're going to sense what's the truth behind this issue. And I think in my office, we've tried to, absolutely just do the work ahead of us. So if you come to my office, you don't get a Republican or Democrat vibe. You get a bunch of hardworking people that are doing the work of this country to get the job done. All that matters is that you have a blue passport. When we look at that, it's not, is he a Democrat or a Republican or an independent? Doesn't matter to us. You have a blue passport, you're taken, your country's going to find a way to come and get you. And I think, if anything, I was blessed by serving some time in the military, and I served under Democrats and Republicans. Both sent me to war. I didn't alter my vote after the fact. So, we just try to have this nonpartisan culture in the office, and we've been grateful for the support that we've received through the passing of the 2020 Levinson Act, the updates we received in the NDAA, which have given us resources and authorities to help families coming home, and the work that Congress is currently doing to get ready for the next one, to keep fine-tuning the machine that allows us to better bring people home and take care of their families while their loved ones are held in prison, and to integrate everyone to include family and hostage when they eventually come back.
Yeah, thank you. Siamek, I don't know if you want to comment on the support piece. If not, I'll move over to deterrence.
On the support piece, I think there really isn't any. The one solid piece of support that I've received is help reimbursing my therapist fees. Outside of that, and for that I am very grateful, it really was a goodbye, good luck experience. And I always thought that if I was a hardened criminal, if I was someone that had committed a violent crime in the U.S., went to prison for 8 years, when I came back, there'd probably be a dozen church, state, and federal programs to help reintegrate me. I don't see any of that, honestly.
Yeah, please.
Not going against what he said, but there was a time, I think when I first walked into the office, it pretty much was like, you get an American back and you fish around your wallet for $10 and go, here's $10 for a cab ride, good luck. But what we are doing now.
Can I have the $10? I'll take it.
Oh, I had something funny to say, but it'd be off color, so I won't. So anyway, I think what we've done since then is we've worked up with the Department of Defense. So when someone comes home, we're not dumping them off in Minot, North Dakota at an airfield and telling them to get a cab. Instead, you get off a plane in San Antonio, Texas. The Department of Defense embraces you. You go into as many days as you want. You can spend 3 hours in post-isolation support activities under the care of the Department of Defense. Receiving psychological evaluations, dental evaluations, medical evaluations. I mean, you might have a cancerous polyp grow in you and you just didn't catch it because you've been in prison for like 5 or 6 years. So the military does all the screening. They've recently received an upgrade that takes them into more of a VIP status. So we've done, I think, a lot to make sure that the first up to 21 days of someone returning is a chance for them to get a medical baseline and a dental baseline and even start to get into some of the psychological help that they may need reintegrating. We fly the families down. We put the families in VIP quarters and make sure that they get a chance to keep reconnecting with the folks, with their loved ones. We fly the families twice per year to Washington, D.C. to talk to us, to talk to their congressmen and senators. That's paid for by the U.S. government, your tax dollars in action. And we give up to 5 years of psychosocial, or should I say psychological support. If you want to see a therapist or go talk to a psychiatrist or psychologist, U.S. government's going to pick that up for 5 years. If you need other medical help, we're also going to be there for you on that. Having said that, he's absolutely right. And we're working with our friends on Capitol Hill, and I feel like it's okay to call out one or two of them. Like Senator Risch has been wonderful. Senator Coons has been amazing. There's so many others I probably feel bad mentioning just two. But they're working night and day to try to come up with what it takes to take this to the next level. Things like the Israelis are doing. They give a stipend to their family members once their loved one's taken. Wouldn't that be a good thing if someone like Siamek's taken, and once the U.S. government declares them to be wrongfully detained, we can actually provide some sort of financial support to your family while you're waiting to come home, so you don't come home to a bereft family that's broke. And one other thing we do is we've done, I think, a decent job of working with groups like the IRS and credit agencies to make sure that when someone comes back, they're not having to explain why their credit rating's 0 and why they've been fined for the tax dollars that they were unable to pay because they were in the prison. So we've made progress, but we are still evolving. We're at probably SPIHA 3.0. When it gets to 5.0 or 6.0, hopefully we'll address some of this. And part of the things that fall on our shoulders to make sure that we're talking to the family members that come home and asking, how did we do? And frankly, we're not hitting it. I'd say we've had some successes, but maybe we'd give ourselves a B- because we're going to be hard on ourselves. And one of the areas that we are struggling and working hard to get right is how to take care of people when they come home. I know that was long, and I'm sorry, but I want to let you know where we're going with this, because Siamek's absolutely right. We've got to get this right, but we embrace this, and we got it for action, and with your help and support, we'll get it done.
Thank you, yeah, and Rich and Carden and French Hill and Stevens, and they put a bill together, and hopefully they're addressing all these things. And I know your office is. So to all of us here, let's help them and support them to get to SPIHA 6.0. So we need to walk and chew gum at the same time, Siamek, you've said this. So how do we do all of this at the same time? How do we both get Americans back home, but also deter countries from taking them in the first place?
I think you're absolutely right. We do have to walk and chew gum at the same time. So I think when a rogue state takes an American hostage, and it's one of my pet peeves, we have to start using the word. Taking someone for ransom, taking an innocent person for ransom, and saying the only way you get out is through a deal, through ransom. That's a definition of a hostage. I don't understand what wrongfully detained means. You're the envoy for hostage affairs, but somehow I was wrongfully detained. I don't understand that. I don't think anyone else does. But so when a rogue state takes an American hostage, we're only left with bad choices. And I think our government has two sacred duties at the same time. The first one is to do whatever you can to get that innocent American out of a foreign dungeon. That includes making unpalatable, distasteful deals with horrible autocrats. That's just reality. And everyone who disagrees has never experienced it. I've never met a hostage while they're in prison saying, don't pay them, let me languish here forever. I've heard them when they come back saying, don't do that, for the next guy, including a Washington Post editorial that criticized the deal that got us out, that was pushing for their own reporter to be paid to come out. So it's not just on an individual basis. It's don't do it for anyone else but me seems to be the standard of those who oppose it. But there's a second component, and it's extremely important, and I would say as sacred, which is we have to do whatever we can to upend the business model. And this is where the main shortcoming is. I will challenge to say that there is currently not a $10 fine. That $10 that Roger owes me. There's not a $10 fine for a rogue state that takes a hostage. It's a definition of arbitrage. As traders would say, the arb is open on commercializing the freedom of Americans. If any of us were sitting in the position of the Ayatollahs in Iran or one of the autocrats in the other countries we know so well, we would say, advise them, yeah, this is a risk-free business. You can only profit from taking a hostage. Deterrence to me means coming out with such draconian consequences for taking an American that these rogue states would get out of the hostage-taking business. Hostage diplomacy has to cease making sense. Now, an important thing to distinguish here is what deterrence is. I hear a lot about prevention. That is not deterrence. Travel bans are not deterrence. That's telling someone not to go. There's plenty of dual nationals, there's plenty of Americans living abroad. There's plenty of supply. It's talking about the demand side. We have to do things where they think twice about taking an American. There have to be escalating, painful measures, like twisting your arm, give me back the hostage, and then being able to let go once they do. What does that look like in real terms? I think President Trump had it right when he put, for example, just off the cuff, he put serious travel restrictions on Iranian diplomats in the UN. They could only go during his tenure from their residence to the office. You want to send your kids to school? Let them be in Iran. What do I care? This is something, but it wasn't done for the hostages. We can do things like that. Then a month later, you can increase the pain and say, well, we no longer refuel the planes of Iranian officials. That was done before as well. A few months after that, well, in fact, there's going to be a flight ban on all Iranian airlines until you let go of the hostages. Now, sanctions are not very effective here because sanctions are a sunk cost. Sanctions mean whether you let go of that hostage or not, these sanctions will remain. And frankly, the sanctions that we put on right now for the hostage business are rather insulting and laughable. They put travel bans on Iranian officials, like the head of Evin prison, that never intended to come to the US. I don't recall the head of Evin prison, saying, hey, I plan to go on Disneyland, but these Americans won't give me my visa. He doesn't have a Bank of America account to be blocked. That is not deterrence. Deterrence is pain for an action and pain that can be taken away, and hopefully some of it that could linger on afterwards. Now, if we can also do a coalition with our allies, and countries like Iran have turned places like Evin prison into a dystopian United Nations of hostages. So we have plenty of like-minded states to work with. The possibilities are endless. I could go on literally for hours giving you ideas of what that pain could look like, and these were drops in the bucket of what we can do and accomplish. But we have chosen not to put any deterrence at all, and do not think that things like sanctioning officials, we've sanctioned everything on Iran, and then everyone sanctioned, and that guy as well. It's really not ineffective. So.
Yeah, thank you for those sobering words as we move forward, and those bills that we keep talking about address part of this. But Ambassador, you have a whole deterrence team on your office. How do you think about this? What can we do better?
So Secretary Blinken asked me to look into deterrence probably in the first few months of his tenure as Secretary of State. President Biden, in his executive order passed in June of 2022, asked us to take a look at deterrence. And we've tried to break it down into elements of national power. Everyone does whip out the sanctioning tool. They might do one or two things on the diplomatic side of the house. But if you want to sanction, or if you want to eventually build up deterrence, you have to look at across the elements of national power: diplomacy, information, intelligence, the military, economic, legal, financial. Everyone might have tools that have never been put into the service of deterring this, or maybe new tools need to be created. And so we work with members on Capitol Hill to create the new authorities that we need to deter this. And we've been at it for about 3 years now. There is already a coalition, a multilateral coalition, small, gaining steam, trying to figure out what those tools are. We're exploring with our partners and allies across the world what tools they can use and how we would best use it. If, say, a citizen from France is taken by the Iranians, how can the United States and all the other countries that are working together in this coalition respond in a way that show the Iranians that we've figured out what they've been doing and that's now going to come to a stop? So even though we've been working at it for 3 years, it's going to take a little more time. And Secretary Blinken, when he gave me the mission like 3 years ago to work on deterrence, and when we created a deterrence team, which now has we now have 3 people who do nothing but deterrence. That's it. He said, Roger, this will get solved in about 10 to 15 years. Now, I hope sooner, but he was of the impression that as you build up the alliances and you build up the tools, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, but one day we're going to be able to dismantle part of my office because the Iranians, the Venezuelans, the Russians, they will realize that we're onto their game multilaterally, and there's no way that they can continue. And then just briefly, some of the things that are currently out there. So number one, there is a coalition that's building steam. And we started to work on it after the Canadians released the Declaration Against Arbitrary Detention in State-to-State Relations. So that's up and running. The train has left the station on that. There's also an independent panel of distinguished jurists from 7 different countries. We have 1 American representing this panel, and they are working on the international norms and the international mechanisms that can be applied against countries that take people as hostage. A third thing is working with the public sector and the private sector. So I think last summer in Norway, we launched a civil society effort to counter and deter, to prevent and deter nation states from doing that. So picture 47 NGOs from around the world now taking up this space. And working with the private sector like OSAC, which I can never remember what it stands for, but 500 companies that have their security professionals meet constantly, and we're now part of that organization. Sam's writing down that. Remember what OSAC? Okay, but we want to make sure that countries like Raytheon, Boeing, Hewlett-Packard, McDonald's, Disney, that when they send someone to a foreign country, they know that there might be some risks there. So we talk about prevention and deterrence, or really on that side, the prevention side. And so we're working hard to try to get this done, but we're not there. It's kind of like I feel like I'm selling a product that's going to come online in a few years, and to an extent I am. But the great part about this is we do get feedback from people like Siamek, and they hold us accountable, and they push us, and we realize that we're coming up short, and he has ideas that we're just never going to think of. Why? He's thought about it for a few years, and he actually has insight into specifically in how the Iranians might view deterrence. And so these are the conversations that need to keep taking place. We're not quite there, but again, 3 people full-time, my office, who do nothing but deterrence, and we're hopeful that we'll get there.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll add one more, to amend the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act to allow private suits against foreign sovereigns for hostage-taking. And that's in the bill, and I think that will be a deterrent. So we have 10 minutes left. I want to get to moral hazards and what's next. So August 1st, 2024, Ambassador. Probably the most complex hostage deal in history, and the largest since the Cold War. 16 prisoners in Russia came home. And it seems, at least from where we stand, that the moment that the Germans decided to release Krasikov, which was the person that Putin wanted in exchange, was when a German national was sentenced to death in Belarus. And the complex deal took place, and of course it took years and years. But tell us about when that moral hazard changes. That is, we think, and you've said this before, that you haven't seen countries take more hostages once you exchange them. But when does that change happen? When do you decide to say, okay, this is a good time to make a deal because someone's being put to death, or because we don't think that they're going to take more hostages?
So a few things. The deal that took place on the 1st of August highlights that it's never just about Spiha. And I always feel a little guilty when people thank me for bringing people home, because it's never me, it's never my office. It's a whole of U.S. government effort. That includes Department of Justice, CIA, DOD, White House entities. And in the case of Russia, I can say it's also NGOs that pressured us, that held us accountable, journalists who asked the hard questions and created a little more drive perhaps in the U.S. government, and that's not a bad thing. Partners and allies, Turkey, Germany, Poland, Norway, Slovenia. All this came together to get it done. So we just can't never take credit in Spiha, because it's always a team sport to bring people home. In terms of the moral hazard question and where it changes, what we do in my office is we whiteboard something. We'll throw it up on the wall and just come up with the craziest ideas. And at times that gets X'd out. That's impossible. They would throw us out of the room for that. But on the Russia deal, you eventually start to come up with the contours of something that might work. And our job is to keep briefing it up higher to see if it makes sense to the National Security Council, our allies in our friends in the interagency, and eventually the president. So again, it's kind of a team sport, but you're briefing hard things. Like, we go back to the initial, another moral hazard, and that's Victor Bout, the merchant of death, being traded for Brittany Griner. And we really had to take a hard look, and some of the questions that the president might ask would be, if he does go back to Russia, will he go back to his life of crime? Will he return to doing evil things? Where do we stand on this? Can we take some sort of calculated risk in relieving someone? Can we sanction that person on the way out the door, so when the criminal goes back to do evil, he finds that he can't really access the bank account? Are there things that we could do to lower the risk? And we look at that, risks and risk mitigation. But really it comes down to one thing. And by the way, I know I'm talking fast. I see this young lady with these cards saying 10 minutes, 5 minutes. So I'm speaking at, you ever listen to a podcast, you turn it up to 1.5 or 2.0? That's what's happening right now. I'm just speaking fast. So in this case, I think the moral hazard comes down to this. There are things that we in this audience value. And I can tell you, the president values it. and that is the individual American who has been taken by a foreign country, or a terrorist group, and they're held unjustly. That's important to us. That's why in the past, we'll send Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 at the cost of American lives to get humans back. So if we're willing to send Delta Force, why aren't we willing to maybe make a diplomatic deal that brings someone back? These are hard decisions to make. They're very distasteful, and the president's made a lot of them during his time in office. But we value the individual. What do our opponents value? Murderers, drug dealers, narco traffickers, people who've done a lot of evil. I've not had anyone on the opposing side ever ask for an American nun that was rightfully jailed for selling puppies to orphans, and she's in a jail in Minot, North Dakota. They never asked for that nun who's arrested for a minor offense. They always are asking for someone like Victor Bout or someone like Krasikov. Does that not say a lot about what they value and what we value? And I'm telling you, I'll take our value system over theirs anytime. Wish I could say I came up with that. That's Secretary Blinken. But that's how we'd address the moral hazard. And by the way, never easy. As you said, these decisions are so tough. I'll get back after one of these things, and I'll look in the mirror, and I'll kind of feel sick to my stomach because I know we did something rough, but then I'll quickly remember that hug on the tarmac, and it makes it right for me.
Well, Siamek?
Let me go back to reiterating. We really do have some great people in this system who are really, really trying their best. And I truly admire what your office and so many others do. And I'm very grateful about the fact that you welcome the criticism. It's really not criticism, it's feedback. This is a new office. It's a startup. So you can't expect it to act like an institution that's been in place for 100 years. I think Roger's team is doing a fantastic job, but they're spread thin. They need a lot more resources, and they need the resources in order to be able to do some of the things that they wish they can do. And I think a lot of the stuff, there's good intentions, like supporting us when we come back, but I stand by what I said. There really isn't that much, at least from my experience. It's from what I'm hearing from the other hostages, it's continuously, slowly improving. We can do better, but we have to put the resources behind it. And the fact is, the rogue states are understanding that this business is profitable, and they're growing it. And they're saying, hey, oh wow, no penalty and a fine, a payoff in the end. I will profit in the end. So as soon as I let go of these guys, I'll just take some more. Well, what do? Then we have to make a deal to get those guys out, as unpalatable as they are. But we have to think about how do we disrupt this business at its root. And I still would challenge that we have not given that proper thought. It's not about what feels good in this town. It's it is what deters those guys. And I would say it's horses for courses. What would work for Iran wouldn't necessarily work for China. So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution either. But we have great people, we have great intentions, but we're very far away, very, very far away from our own potential. And I think we can move a lot faster than the horizon that you spoke about if the will is there. I think there's room for carrots, but there has to be sticks. And what I would see having done wrong is there's sometimes only carrots and sometimes only sticks. Well, let's merge them together and see what we can do. I think we can accomplish a lot more. Again, when it comes to things like the coalition, what I have seen, a lot of good intention, but not the people in those organizations are fantastic, but they don't have the authority to push things within their governments. You mentioned the Canadians. Canada is where all the Islamic republics kind of, the high-ups there take all the embezzled money that comes from human rights violations and corruption and literally take billions of dollars and live in the high life in Toronto. And then they say, I wonder how I could get a Canadian out. Well, you got like, the number 3 of the regime, hanging out in Toronto, who is money laundered, put him behind bars, see how fast they'll trade him for brilliant. he's right. I spend 8 hours in a think tank, literally in a tank, thinking about this stuff. But I would say that would occur to a person that I got these, the brother of the head of the Iranian judiciary sitting there with corrupt, laundered money in Toronto. I wonder how I can get a Canadian out. You got to be kidding me. So we have the resources to stop this, but every action we take has a consequence. Everything. If you want to deter Iran, we give OFAC license waivers to Iran left, right, and center on a weekly basis. We can target the ones that only affect the Iranian regime and shut it off. You took a hostage, it's gone. No waivers, gone. Let them go. But stop a waiver, like allowing Iran to sell electricity to Iraq. Now you have a problem with the Iraqi security. Everything has consequences. And we have to think through these things very carefully. It's a tough job. And I really admire you for being in a position where you free us, and then I sit here criticizing you years later. But I do it with a lot of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think that wraps up our panel. Thank you so much. Please join me then, the SPIHA, Ambassador Roger Carstens, and Siamek Namazi. Thank you so much.